Hello and welcome to the program. I am Suren. I intend to continue with the subject we were fascinated about, the subject of future, in the view of methodical and scientific study within the light of recent psychological considerations. The question that comes to mind, especially after what we have been considering during the last few episodes, is in what form does the human being express himself or herself during the hours that immediately follow the moment when the life is extinct by the doctor is declared? Where is the beloved, dear one? We all may ask in our wordless misery, as it was said before, and nameless despair as we watch by that shell, which a few minutes previously contained bright, living personality for us, so radiant and so dear, probably thinking as quick in perception, eager in intelligence. We feel devastated and even perhaps lost. I will tell you of what I know, as it is declared by those who have been there and experienced and now clearly explaining to us. During the hour after the passing of the soul, with whom we have been intimately bound, it is hard to believe in extinction. And ours is a right intuition when we instinctively refuse to believe that all is now over, that the soul has come to its journey's end. It's therefore time that we talk about this issue. To start with, during the whole of a man's earthly life, he is accompanied by the double or unifying body. You may or may not have known this. It is the actual link between the deeper mind and the brain, and has many important functions. As you may know, when you fall asleep, your consciousness no longer controls your physical body. There is not only an apparent cutting off point, but an entry into apparent oblivion. The usual disordered dreams are frequently but the play of nerves roused or irritated by the daily activities. In fact, during sleep, the soul exists within the double, while the body is recharged with nervous energy, even with life units. So, sleep has been wisely recognized as being even more important than food or drink. Alas, space and time do not permit much of a discussion of this aspect in the life of the living man. However, it is necessary for you only to realize that the double, if it could be made visible, is in appearance at least an exact counterpart of the physical form. The two are bound together by many little threads and by two silver cords. One of these makes contact with the solar plexus, the other with the brain. They all may lengthen or be extended during sleep or even during half sleep, or while dozing off, and they have considerable elasticity. When a man slowly dies, these threads and the cords are gradually broken. Death occurs when these two principal communicating lines with brain and solar plexus are severed. That is at least what we have been told by the psychic endeavor. It's a well-known fact that life occasionally lingers in certain cells of the body after the soul has fled. This phenomenon has always baffled the physicians and the scientists, but there is a simple explanation for it. The double still adheres to the shell by means of certain of the threads, which have not yet been broken. And the soul does not suffer in the physical sense, if thus delayed in his journey. He may only suffer in the sense that he has thereby a greater awareness of the immediate surroundings of the physical body. It gives him the power to perceive friends and relations wherever this worn-out garment lies. As a rule, however, he obtains complete freedom from Earth's stringent grasp within an hour or a few hours of death. Our advice is thus as follows. When you watch by the dead or grieve for a departed friend, do not be too anxious or concerned for him in the period immediately following his release. For the soul at that time is usually in a state of half sleep. All the agony, all the strange dreams, the tortured fever of mind precede the translation of the soul to the double at the moment of death, unless the death be of a violent character. Peace reigns about the human consciousness. It is resting in dimness, and sometimes is capable of perceiving those dear friends or relatives who have already passed to another life. Conditions, of course, vary enormously. Now consider that the man or woman who might have been never deeply loved or cared for any other human soul may, at death, rise from the body of denser kind into loneliness and into a night that and its impenetrable blackness is like no night on earth. This state of complete isolation, however, is only allotted to a few human beings. Of course, the egoist or the cruel man will be probably condemned to it, but for such a fate, his selfishness must be inordinate, his cruelty considerable. However, you need to know that the average man or woman, when he or she is dying, suffers no pain. They have become so dissevered already from the body that when the flesh seems to be in agony, the actual soul merely feels very drowsy and has a sensation of drifting hither and thither, to and fro, like a bird resting on the wind. This sensation has its own natural delight after the pain of the illness which has led the soul to the change of death. So grieve not for the apparent agony of the dying, and instead rejoice, because they are already freed from the torment and are already fluttering between two existences, and abide in that nameless content, which is due to the quiescence of the mind and awareness. Slowly the soul then rises into the double, and for a brief time hovers above the physical counterpart. Someday, people will be able to photograph this moment, as they are doing far better, and then, being that passes us, may be registered on the image as a little white cloud, a pale essence. Only so can this kernel of personality appear to even the finest instrument. But to discarnate beings, very different will seem the flight of the soul for the perceptions of the etheric body, far more finely attuned. And usually those relatives or friends who attend upon death journey to traveler from the etheric world. Let us now talk about the place of shadows, namely Hades. It is not possible to deal with even the minutest of the conditions which prevail in Hades for the multitude of the newly dead. Therefore, we will trace the course of an average man who has led a well-ordered life on earth. According to the nature of the individual, so also is the length of his stay in the place of shadows. After a vision of the blood kindred or psychic kindred, and sometimes after communion with them, the soul rests seemingly within a veil, in a state of peaceful quiescence, of semi-suspended consciousness, seeing fragmentary happenings, his past life. These beings now are neither tainted by fear nor whipped by emotion. The person in question watches this changing show as a man drowsily watches a shimmering, sunny landscape on a midsummer's day. He is in truth thoroughly detached and apart, judging the individual who participates in these experiences, judging his own self with the aid of the light from above. The terminologies within the husk, or the play of the shadow show, define this period. Souls vary considerably in their reactions to it. Some retain scarcely any recollection of it. Others are too aloof and too drugged, in a sense, by the condition of peaceful quiescence to feel either pleasure or pain. But all the while, progress has been made. The body is loosening, working out, withdrawing from the husk, until, at last, judgment is completed. The soul who takes flight casts the husk from him, as a man throws an old cloak or a jacket from his shoulders. For the spirit or light from above has accomplished its work of summing up, leaving to the traveler the final decision. Once our pilgrim has, as it were, cast his skin, flung away the tattered remnant that bound him to mortality, he passes into the world of illusion and assumes full consciousness. The double re-image within the veil becomes the body of man in the next life. Only the outer rind or after image has been flung away. 3 or 4 days of earth time may suffice for this experience of the shadow show, for the re-knitting and readjustment of the ego to the etheric body. It is true, however, that certain abnormal men and women linger a long while in Hades and wander to and fro in its grim ways, in a sense, encountering certain strange beings, however, near the borders of the physical world, who wake old sorrows and troubles in the minds of men and who played upon the understanding of certain individuals they would possess was still in the flesh, dethroning the reason, stealing from man his birthright. But these creatures have no part in the chronicles of death. However, they cannot harm or hinder the pilgrim's journey from the physical world to us, drifting without pain or stress through Hades, that place of half-lights, of drowsy image-making, and, with a few exceptions, in no way or sense a place of fear or suffering. What about the memory and identity after death? This is an excellent question. Physiologists will tell you that memory is merely a condition of the brain. Injure a certain part of that delicate organism, and a healthy individual will become mentally a blank, will be quite unable to recall any fact concerning himself, neither any past experience whatsoever. Actually, this unfortunate man has not forgotten his past, nor is he intellectually a blank. A certain part of the mechanism of the brain has ceased to function, so he is unable to manifest any intelligence, dependent on memory, to the visible world of man. But he is still intellectually alive and retains complete power over his memory, completely apart from his actual physical body. For the double or unifying form that is the counterpart of that physical body and registers more or less as the brain registers the facts and experiences in the life of its owner. Bear in mind that the double accompanies the man from birth to death, houses and shelters his soul, serves him even more faithfully than the actual physical form of which he is daily aware, as his body. According to the human view, memory is necessary to a sense of identity, to the idea of individuality, and all that is conveyed by the words soul or consciousness. Sense of identity, however, is not lost through the change of death. For the soul finds his fundamental memory center in his double, which, as we have informed you before, is his habitation in the afterlife. As the double casts away an outer husk, only its essential part, the etheric body, which has accompanied the traveler and functioned for him all through his earthen life, goes on and serves the soul on the plane of illusion, maintaining continuity of individuality through continuity of memory. During the play of the shadow show, this etheric form, I should say, gathers a new force and is remolded, readjusted to the soul, and there is a strange and wonderful renewal, a sense of flooding life in the last stages. As the butterfly breaks through the chrysalis, as the individual who has entered the period within the husk, the old, decrepit man in appearance passes from it in a youthful body, pulsating with life and eager with human desires. On the plane of illusion, these desires are satisfied. We shall not all sleep. Let's consider that. Apart from revelations in the scriptures, what is the real teaching of the scriptures concerning the afterlife? We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. The words of Apostle Paul harmonize with the account of the afterlife given in these programs. The phrase, "we shall not all sleep," implies that many do still sleep until the last trumpet sounds, until the end of the earth, as they are conditioned to do so. In what garden and in what world, in what space do these sleepers rest, would you say? One is really urged to ask these. As birds live in the air, so do these souls exist in the etheric zone, which is truly all about the earth. Let us remember that they are the inhabitants of the world of illusion. Now, on that plane, save in the last stages, there is an almost entire absence of conflict and effort. Accordingly, there is an absence of any true creation. Many human beings regard such a state as the most desirable condition of being. When they ask for heaven, why on earth, they indicate by the word heaven a life without conflict or effort. Those who are satisfied with such a life after death in the illusion world and so linger within its borders until the last trumpet sounds, well, this phrase of Apostle Paul's must be read symbolically. Once upon a time, it possessed its own peculiar meaning in the ancient world. Perhaps a meaning which has been lost today. The souls who rest on the third plane until they are aroused or wakened by this summons may be correctly called the sleepers. For what does sleep indicate anyway, if not an absence of conscious conflict and effort? try to answer that. Existence seems, in many respects, as real to the occupant of the world of illusion as it does to a king, politician, lawyer, doctor, clergyman, and just ordinary working man on the street. However, it also contains one very important difference. The soul has no need to put forth any struggle or effort. He obtains his desire through the mere act of desire. So he cannot be said to live as he did on earth, or gloriously as he would live in the other world of existence. He may be, in truth, the sleeper mentioned in the New Testament. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. This text should infer that some of the dead do not sleep. In other words, many of those who have died scorn the pleasant fields of illusion, they, deep content and desire, conflict, creation, effort, and so they either become incarnate again or choose wisely to go upwards and to enter the world of Eidos, to find indeed life more abundantly within that masterpiece. In that state of grace, the traveler meets with the finest glories of appearance, with the triumph of life in form. We need now speak a few things about the after image, or the husk. The after image might be likened to an old traveler's cloak or jacket. Though he discards it, it remains by the roadside and may be picked up and worn again. Ghosts have been said to walk for many years in certain old mansions and certain seasons, or inconsequently without any apparent rhyme or reason. As we are advised, say to yourself, if you meet one of these restless shades, here walks the ancient cloak or a shirt, in the old disguise, perhaps of some roundhead or cavalier, of some cowled monk or holy nun, of some modern gentleman who has indulged in butchery, or has himself been murdered with new and modern weapons, but with the same old passions of rage and hatred behind him. It is that same repetitive passion that provides the energy which, for a brief space, reanimates the after image, but it may not necessarily walk in its own place if there be not association of memory, energizing thought or idea behind it. Somewhere within the realms of space exists the brawler who died so violently, or the nun or monk who enriched that cloak or shirt with all their brooding religious passions. They are resting, while also withdrawing temporarily from their active life in another sphere, and for a moment, by reason of the binding threads or past fate, envisage again the old scene where they lived or from which they took their leave of life. They cast on it but the careless thought which is now unclouded by remorse, regret, or any other emotion. The mere light flick of the thought stirs up the old cloak, causing it to masquerade again within the building or about the grounds which were familiar to it in life. But be assured that the essential ego does not return and play the old game, making mockery of it on the stage of earth, and with its insubstantial vaporization, with its elusive state of vanishing into thin air. Such ghosts or phantoms who wander thus meaninglessly are indeed but ancient garments tossed back to visibility at the appointed hour, when the man or woman who has inner sight is present to record this deceptive masquerade. We know that all rules have their exceptions, and so all hauntings may not come under one rule. It is accurate to accept the average ghost as a persistence of manifestation of energy through the medium of the after image, focused by the pull of an old thread of passionate memory. Now another question comes to mind. What about the violent death? Sometimes the dead do not know that they have died. This statement may seem incredible at first, yet it is true in certain fairly rare cases. Consider the war conditions, for example. On the other hand, only the past history of the dead man can make this curious apprehension of his state. If he passes through the gates of death, bearing with him a passionate love of material possessions, he will, even after a fleeting glimpse of his discarnate kindred, tenaciously hold to the belief that he is still a man of flesh and blood, wandering perhaps on the hills in a mist, but still filled with the life of earthian or physical kind. He will passionately seek for his house, his money, or whatever else is his particular treasure in the dark ways beyond the death. And sometimes they may appear in an elusive manner, a little ahead of him, leaping thus only for a brief moment before his subjective vision, and then vanishing just like the cloud, descending once more, reducing all things for him to nullity. Such can be also with an egoist who will linger for some time on the borders between the two worlds, for some time, freedom coming when the force of that passion for material possessions weakens and fades. There are also certain others who remain thus in Hades, but not unhappily as a rule. I refer to certain young men of careless animal and occasionally vicious life, who die violent deaths. These poor fellows are suddenly wrenched from their bodies while still they are in the prime of manhood. They are not, in any sense, capable of grasping for a while the difference between earth life and the afterlife. So they too remain in ignorance and must remain in a kind of coma until the delicate etheric body has recovered from the shock of the rapid severance from the earthly shape, physical body. However, the great majority of men and women after death, like passenger birds, through Hades, resting only for a brief while here and there, making one contact with their old friends or relatives who preceded them, held but for a short spell by the play of the shadow show, and then lose into the new life, into the effortless land, where the pattern is again woven, but on that plane it will have no new design, no new threads or colors. And the subject of the death that follows, a period of senility. That's a different but important question. The very old may, before their passing from earth in part, lose their memory or lose their grasp on facts and their power of understanding. This tragic decay all too often causes the observer of it to lose his faith in an afterlife. For the soul, it seems, under such circumstances, dependent merely on the brain, but this is a false conclusion. The soul, or active ego, has been compelled partially to retire into the double during waking hours, because the cord between the brain and the etheric counterpart has either been frayed or has snapped. The actual life of the physical body is still maintained through the second cord or through any of those threads which still adhere to the two shapes. So the aged, apparently mindless, man or woman, is in no sense mindless. He or she has merely withdrawn a little way from you and has no need of your pity, for through that withdrawal, his awareness is almost wholly confined within his unifying body. Let us call it the body of his resurrection. What about the pattern? Beyond ambition, beyond any human forms of selfishness, beyond these struggling, scarcely leashed desires are affection, love, the drawing intangible force between kindred souls. It is stronger that death, it conquers despair and may conquer on all the finite levels of existence. It must be reckoned as a cosmic principle and is known as the power behind the pattern, which is being woven for you as long as time for you exists. Death seems terrible to the average man because of its apparent loneliness. If he but knew it, his fears are in vain. His dread of being reft from the pattern, that is to say, from those he loves, has no foundation, has no real substance behind it. Because wherever he may journey after death. Always will he be caught again into the design of which is a part of him. Always will he find again the same, however deep in his temporary oblivion, or however varied his experience. Certain human souls who were knit into his earthen life, who were loved deeply, if sometimes blindly or in evil ways, by him in those bygone days. It is true that the more primitive types are incapable of the love of the whole being. They fail to understand that to love in this manner is to observe the first law of progress. It is a love that is within the seeds of immortality. Such primitive souls as are of the beginning of the pattern frequently initiate its design with hatreds, deathless antagonisms, which is encountered again on the third plane. Hound back such soul to earth, where they are reborn, and where, if progress is made, they may learn the first spiritual law, namely, the law of the beloved. No man or woman who has mastered it need fear death, for even if he go first, some other who is in his pattern, and therefore truly his kindred, will speedily join him, give him greeting in the great adventure which lies beyond the death. Call death your friend. Hail death as your deliverer. For the darkness and soil which is in every earth, planet, love passes, vanishes with your passing. Now we will talk about the evolution of the psyche. In the previous programs, I found a chart of existence. It was inadvisable to enter in such a chart upon any detailed description of the qualities essential to the navigator if he would speedily and successfully steer his course across these strange worlds. When on earth, some of us were the firm believers in the power and strength of agape, or love. In the New Testament, or the Scriptures, Apostle Paul uses the word which is translated as charity, but attributed to it a meaning which has been also allotted to real love. Here in the afterlife, we perceive that neither of these words conveys the whole significance of the good, for they have been so long interpreted by human and finite minds that they have become worn and defaced, soiled and obscured by contact with many natures of an infinitely varied character. To some, the word love means only the passion which lights up between men and women. To others, it is the intellectual love shared by two friends, kindred souls. Thirdly, and lastly, love is held by many to be compassion for others, and to contain with it that communal sense of the brotherhood of men. that love, in a general sense, which has led undoubtedly to find endeavor in past times, but always these conceptions fall short of the ideal. Though again and again, agnostic and Christian or others study the scriptures so diligently, the image in their hearts, the Sermon on the Mount, but still fail, still their understanding perishes in the presence of the great words of immortality. No man or woman has ever really succeeded in understanding or grasping the whole lofty vision of love as it was seen by the Christ. So now we survey the present earth and perceive the chronicle of the years. We need to feel the need of a word which is not being debased by man, which can still suggest and contain the primary need of the soul, which will define that urge so essential to the psyche when it would climb the one rung to another on the ladder of consciousness. The permanent reality of progress is to be found in increase of wisdom. For wisdom may be defined as right judgment concerning that truth. Upon every plan of being, the conception of truth must necessarily be limited or enlarged by the conditions of life, by the form the soul assumes, or by that extension of consciousness which at the last tends to shake off form, as the trees in autumn cast off their leaves. On the dense plane of matter, known as earth, the term truth is still holy, and to the mind of many men unsoiled. It may therefore be used to illustrate what we believe to have been, say, Christ's meaning, where the word love is put into his mouth in the Holy Scriptures. But it is not complete unless right judgment is added to it. Consider then the significance of wisdom. Clearly, that lofty word resides in the highest love between man and woman. Intellectual love, compassion, faith, and last but not least, the power of vision. All these are possessed by the man or woman who rightly judges truth. And whatever your soul or soul of the beloved is evolving, be assured that wisdom is the primary urge which causes the soul to choose to go up rather than down, to select the finer life, the greater reality, rather than existence in denser form, in more material worlds or planets. Love your enemies. Bless them that persecute you. These beautiful and enigmatic phrases have troubled and perplexed every sincere seeker, Christian or Muslim, who has endeavored to apply them to his life. Only through wisdom can he in any measure fulfill their command, expressing them literally in action and thought, for they are contained in wisdom. Their idea depends for its manifestation for its very life and right judgment of the truth. The simple peasant, the humble working man or woman, ignorant in the eyes of the world, may yet be wholly wise if they possess spiritual discernment, which for the human soul expresses indeed Christ's vision when he spoke of love. So must it be on each plane of being in the unseen. Wisdom is the light that in every instance gives shape and life to love in its secret hidden root, is the inspiration, the power that causes the forward and upward progression expressed in the terminology, the evolution of the psyche. We will speak some more by the next episode. Until then, keep smiling and be very, very happy. Thank you.